long before the world was divided by nations, flags, and borders, before men spoke different tongues or worshipped in different temples. There was one people, one speech, and one dream. The Bible's book of Genesis describes this age not long after the Great Flood, when Noah's descendants spread eastward and settled in a fertile land known as Shinar, a vast region we now recognize as Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. It is here, on the flat plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, that humanity's most ambitious project began, a tower that would touch the heavens. This was no mere legend of stone and pride. It reflected a real cultural revolution, one that changed how humans built their world. In this region, unlike Egypt or the Levant, there was no abundance of stone. Instead, early builders discovered the power of fired clay bricks, baked hard in kilns and bound with bitumen, a natural tar. The biblical text even highlights this innovation. They said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. These were the world's first engineered materials, and with them, humanity's imagination expanded beyond survival toward architecture, community, and permanence. The builders envisioned more than a single structure. They wanted a city, a place where all could live, work, and worship together. In their unity, they saw strength. In their tower, they saw purpose. "Let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens," they said, "so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered across the earth." It wasn't just about pride. It was about identity, a shared human desire to belong and to endure. But as the tower rose, something else began to grow too. A subtle shift from faith in God to faith in themselves. For ancient readers of Genesis, this story wasn't only about construction. It was about ambition without humility, a warning about the human tendency to overreach. And perhaps it was also inspired by something very real. Archaeologists believe that the Tower of Babel may have been modeled after an actual Mesopotamian structure, the Etemenanki, the great ziggurat of Babylon. Its name in Sumerian means Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. It stood nearly 300 feet tall, dedicated to the god Marduk, and for its time it was among the largest structures ever built by human hands. To a traveler in the ancient world, it would have seemed as though it touched the sky, a fitting image for a people who dared to reach for heaven. But the higher the tower climbed, the greater the arrogance beneath it. According to Genesis, God looked down upon their creation and said, "Behold, the people are one, and they all have one language. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do." In those few words lies a deep truth. Human unity, when driven by pride instead of purpose, can become dangerous. So, instead of sending a flood or fire, God intervened with something far subtler and far more profound. One morning, the builders awoke to find they could no longer understand each other. One shouted a command, another heard gibberish. Orders turned to arguments. Teams dissolved into chaos. The same voices that once sang together now fell silent in confusion. And so the tower was abandoned. The great city of unity became the birthplace of division. The site was named Babel, meaning confusion. From there, the story says, humanity scattered across the earth, each group speaking its own tongue, forming its own identity. It was the end of humanity's first universal civilization, and the beginning of all the diversity we see today. For thousands of years, people have wondered, was this simply an origin myth for language differences, or was there something deeper? Modern scholars interpret the Tower of Babel as an ideological story, a narrative that explains how something came to be. In this case, how humanity's languages, cultures, and nations diverged. But others see it as a theological mirror, a reminder that unity without humility leads to collapse. Interestingly, fragments of Babylonian records describe grand temple towers, ziggurats, built to connect heaven and earth. Each level represented a step between the mortal and divine. These structures weren't just architectural feats, they were spiritual ladders, anchored in the belief that gods could descend and humans could ascend. In that light, the Tower of Babel wasn't simply a monument to pride. It was a human attempt to restore contact with the divine, perhaps even to reverse the separation caused by the flood. But it also revealed a truth still relevant today. When humans try to take heaven by their own means, they often end up dividing the very world they hoped to unite. And yet, the story of Babel never truly ended. Every era has built its own tower. The industrial age built its factories and smokestacks. The modern age built skyscrapers and satellites. Today, our towers are digital. Networks, data centers, and artificial intelligence. We speak again in one language, the language of technology. And once more, humanity seems united in ambition. But history whispers a warning. When our inventions outgrow our wisdom, confusion always follows. The Tower of Babel is not merely about divine punishment. It's about human limitation and the cost of forgetting it. In the biblical worldview, unity was not the problem. Pride was. When unity becomes self-worship, it fractures. When ambition ignores humility, collapse is inevitable. In the ruins of Babel, we find both a caution and a call. To build, yes, but to build wisely. To speak boldly, but to listen too. Think of how far we've come since that ancient plain in Shinar. We've crossed oceans, split the atom, walked on the moon. We've built machines that think and networks that connect billions across the planet. In some ways, we've rebuilt the tower, only this time with code instead of clay. The story of Babel asks us a simple question. Are we using our unity to reach the heavens, or are we once again building a monument to ourselves? Whether you take it as history, parable, or prophecy, the Tower of Babel endures because it speaks to something timeless in the human spirit. Our longing to rise, to understand, to make our mark, and perhaps to be reminded that not everything higher is better. In a world more connected than ever, the lesson of Babel may be this: greatness, untempered by humility, always leads to confusion. I'm God's faithful, and this has been another journey into the ancient world, where faith, history, and human nature meet. If you enjoyed this reflection, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Until next time, may your towers be built with wisdom, and your words always bring understanding